Hey, welcome back. It's David Schocik again. We're talking about America. America listens, and really the merging of spirituality and politics. Strange bedfellows, as they say, but I think the more we look at it, the more we realize that, well, whatever we believe is going on in the world, that politics is kind of a place. It's a shared experience we have, and it's one of the few really shared experiences that the whole country has, America, United States. And so it's a point of common dialogue. And there are people who choose to ignore it, and there are people who are very involved. But it's definitely a great opportunity because it's something that we all have an investment in. And it's something that we, frankly, as in a democracy, we have a responsibility for. The government we get is literally the government we choose, if you believe that. Some people don't believe that. But we have a responsibility. We have the freedom to speak. By and large, most people aren't being arrested for sharing their views. And we do have a responsibility to each other to be willing to perhaps embrace some of the ideals of the country. And those include free speech and the value of every individual. So when we say that we're invested in this experiment that's called democracy, it's like, well, are we going to actually take any accountability for our own role in this? So I think one of the ways that I feel a desire to engage in that, and invite you to join with me if you'd like in this, is to create context in which respectful discussion can occur. It occurs to me that patriotism has been a very kind of mixed statement. What does it mean to be patriotic? Is it even good to be patriotic? Does it mean being in favor of wars that shouldn't be happening and things like that? What is it? And then other people, there are different views on patriotism. Some see it as the most noble characteristic of the bravest among us, those who have been willing to put their lives on the line and suffer tremendous costs for themselves and their family for being service members and members of families of servicemen, wives of servicemen, and the servicemen who go and literally put their lives on the line. I grew up in the time of Vietnam, and the servicemen coming back were getting booed and spit on. And not only did they have the horrible experience of Vietnam for many of them, but then the horrible reintegration. Saw a very powerful movie recently in which the emphasis was shown on the fact that more people are being lost, more servicemen are being lost after they come home through suicide than were lost in the war because of the terrible toll that war takes on people, and how it just this having respect for people, no matter what your views are about military action and things like that, having respect for these people who are paying such a high price in our society for these things. My sister is the wife of a military guy from Vietnam, and her family paid a tremendous price for that. She paid a tremendous price for it. And a lot of the time on the right, on the left in this country, I've noticed sort of this willingness to demonize these people who are often really the bravest among us. And, can we have respect for every view, even if it's very different from our own, and particularly when people are putting their lives on the line and paying a great cost for that? Just to have compassion for that, I think, is a great start in terms of patriotism. And you can see how people who have paid that price have trouble when other people are disrespectful of their service. I'm perhaps getting a little off track here, but my point is really to dive into this idea of patriotism. What does it mean to be patriotic, and what's a meaningful patriotism? Since we're going to be talking about America, this America hopefully listening to one another. What does it mean to be someone who values the shared creed that America is based on? America isn't based on the shared social and genetic history of England, for example, or the shared social and genetic history of Germany or France or Spain or Poland or all these, all the other countries in the world or in the old world, where really countries were formed around race and language and ethnicity and shared heritage. The United States isn't based on that. The United States is based on a creed that all men are created equal, which is, of course, expanded appropriately to mean all men and women are created equal, and gradually moving towards a different type of experience of society than those based on those old worlds, where in England you've got even if there's a lot of different ethnic cultures coming in, you've still got the majority is English, not just white, but English, right? Like they've got like a particular white with a particular history. And that, no matter how many outside influences coming in, that's a very different experience from being in America, where the largest group is about 6 or 8%, not 70% like it might be in England or France or places like that. But 6 or 8%, the English and German each make up about that in the United States. So here we are in this plurality of hundreds of different people from hundreds of different countries, all coming together. Well, what is it that brings them together? What is it that even makes the place a country at all? Really, there's obviously the geography, but the real thing is the shared creed, the belief that we are all created by our Creator equally, or created by nature equally, depending on how you look at it. And how are we going to build a country around that? And is it even a good idea? And again, that democracy is the place in which this is all, and it's people argue it's a republic. Yes, but the basic idea is that one person, one vote, and that will be the way we want it to be. Sometimes it's that way, sometimes it isn't. There's all the debate about elections and are they fair and all that. But the American creed, the value system that we're trying to achieve, is respecting the vote of all people, with the idea that when we have a free society in which people can debate, they can argue, they can be heard, and then freely go to the polls, that we will get the results that are best for our long-term care and survival and well-being. It's an experiment. There are those who feel that it won't work. There was a brilliant philosopher, probably people know this guy, is named Plato, right? In back in the day, Greek philosopher, and he had a lot of ideas about governments. Of course, democracy comes from Greece originally. And one of the things that he commented on, his idea was that we should have an enlightened philosopher as basically a dictator king, lots of centralized power. But, and the reason he didn't think democracy was a good idea is a very interesting one. He said, because when the people can determine how the government operates and how money's spent, they'll always spend more than they have. And really, a great threat to American society right now is the fact that the country's $37 trillion in debt. It's $100,000 for each person in the country. That's a lot of money. So we're trying to stem the tide here and hope that Plato's not right, that democracy doesn't collapse in on itself. So, a little bit of talk about these things, but where does patriotism fit into this? And there isn't a lot of spirituality here yet, right? This is sort of how politics and spirituality really serve each other ultimately. And people who are very into politics might not be willing to look at a more spiritual perspective on things because they really have a strong belief in their power structures. Political influence is powerful, for example, they'll believe. Whereas people in spirituality, a lot of the time they find politics ugly and messy and they don't want to have to do with it. There's a lot of conflict involved. They don't like that a lot of the time. And all kinds of different things in between. But what I'm trying to get here is, like, if we bring the idea of spiritual wisdom, the spiritual wisdom practices, if we bring that into our dialogue about America and about how to build a stronger America politically, there's an old saying, Christianity is a wonderful thing. It'd be great if a country ever practiced it. And that's kind of the idea here, though I'm not promoting in any way one religion or anything like that. But in terms of informing ideas about true patriotism, we can see, and this is pretty simple, but it's nice to emphasize it, I think, we can see that there's truth in this statement that a divided house does not stand. Whether we look in families or businesses or sports teams or whatever example we want to have, when there's fighting between the members of a group, when they're breaking each other down, they don't have the strength to successfully succeed in the larger environment. So I submit a definition of patriotism for your consideration. And the definition is this, that it is patriotic to take the time as an American to truly understand and respect the views of your countrymen, particularly those who disagree with you. Because the danger comes in a divided house. And a truly unpatriotic act, from this perspective, would be to demonize other Americans with different views from your own to the point where you're willing to actually fight them. And then the United States cannot promote its ideals. It cannot promote anything in the world. People have different opinions, obviously, about the impact of the United States in the world, but it has been a place from which democracy has spread. It has done great good in the world in many ways. And the United States cannot maintain its own strength. It cannot provide a safe and positive environment for its citizens. And it can't help others in the world unless it is first strong within itself. And if it's divided, it's not strong. So our first responsibility, if we care about patriotism, if we care about the country, is to make sure that we are not adding to the division in our own country. It is unpatriotic to demonize the left if you're on the right. It's unpatriotic to demonize the right if you're on the left. Within our country, we need to start learning to understand and respect the views of people who have very diverse experiences in this country. Growing up in Wyoming on a ranch is not the same as growing up in downtown Manhattan. These are profoundly different experiences, or growing up in the Bronx, or growing up in Los Angeles, or growing up in Alaska, or Hawaii, or Florida, or Texas, or people who've traveled and had the opportunity to really get to know people in the other part of the country, or even better, have lived in other parts of the country, have a much different perspective than those who've just stayed in one place. I heard an interesting analysis recently. Someone said that, in the 60s and 70s in the United States, there's great prosperity, and generally people could afford to have a single bread earner in the household. And given the social mores at the time, traditionally women were home. Most households were, when I grew up, all of the households in the neighborhood had a mother home all the time. And so they were there creating a whole third society, which was not work and not school, but home. And they were helping the churches and helping the community charities and things like that, and taking care of the kids as a group. So it's a very different society from one where everybody's working all the time. Men and women both need to work. But one of the benefits of that time, besides what might be obvious benefits in terms of more leisure and wealth, one of the benefits of that time was that if the breadwinner in the family got a better job offer in, say, they're working in Boston, they get a job in Phoenix, the family would tend to move. Whereas now you need to get two better job offers, and that really reduces mobility, or it reduces people moving. So what happens was, whereas in the 50s and 60s and 70s, there was much more of this experience of people going, and the person from Boston goes and lives in Phoenix for 5 or 10 years, or maybe the rest of their lives. there was much greater understanding in a very practical, lived, visceral way among Americans. Americans started appreciating and really loving the different culture that comes from different parts of America. And that's really reduced now because there's much less mobility in terms of moving around. So we have to find other means to understand and respect each other. You know, someone who comes from the North who ends up loving the blues or loving Dixieland music or loving barbecue or something like that, or, you know, there is a beauty and a power and a richness to the culture, all many different cultures within the United States, and yet we're all unified in our interests because a divided house cannot stand. So it behooves us, and it's our responsibility really, to not allow ourselves to demonize, to see as less than human, to look down on anyone in our country. We will have radically different opinions. But the strength of this country, originally, this is where it came from. There was tremendous fighting between the founding fathers. They basically were having political mud fights all the time. Jefferson, Adams, all of these things. But they allowed themselves not to leave the room when the mud started flying because there was a dedication to a common ideal. That ideal is that we are correct to say we do not have all the answers, but in this great and diverse country in which we live, maybe the guy in Texas has the answer. Maybe the guy in California has the answer. Maybe the guy in Kansas has the answer. The farmers, maybe they have the answer. Maybe the elite academic in Boston has the answer. Elite, you know, just being a term there. Maybe the academic at MIT has the answer. Or maybe the person who's field dressing the moose has the answer. These are very different experiences. So I submit this idea that if you're interested in being patriotic in a true way, isn't it true that the first thing you must do is help strengthen your own home, your own house, your own country? Not just your family's home, not just the town or even the state or even the region that you're from. But to strengthen America, to be a true patriot, you have to take some time and think, well, you know, they're my brothers and sisters. They're my fellow Americans. We have a shared interest in this country being safe and secure. We are all Americans. And isn't it important then to take that extra moment, takes that extra time, and stop blaming the North or blaming the South or blaming the West or blaming the center of the country, and taking that extra moment, that extra time to remember, well, if I'm going to be true to my country, if I'm going to be an American patriot, I need to take time to understand, take extra time to understand the many different types of people in this country. We have a shared interest, and we need to be the United States of America, to be strong and to have all the benefits that strength can bring. Often greater kindness, greater compassion, greater humanity. When we take the time to understand each other, we learn so much and we become a stronger country. So it comes down to, well, what do we want? Do we want the cheap drama of demonizing someone else in our country? Or do we want to contribute to being a stronger country that can ideally promote the virtues of freedom and personal freedom, which is something we all share the desire for, and the robust vitality that the New World experience has brought, and which has been shared with so much of the world? We can see America as a positive influence in the world or a negative influence in the world. What we need to do first to make sure that it's all the things good that it can be is make sure that we practice this tolerance and understanding with each other at home first, so that we are united, not the divided states at war with each other, but the United States unified, strong, and therefore able to follow the better angels of our nature. This is David Schocik at the Rhode Island Shore. We'll continue with America Listens. Thanks for listening now.